Well, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day that you're looking at this. I'm Electra Porzel. I'm the director of the Language of Consciousness Institute, and I lead a discussion group that's based on Charles Einstein's blog, a January blog that was talking about old stories and next stories or new stories. And the premise of it is that there are stories that our society told us about how we were and about how society was that were just stories. They weren't real, but we believed them to be real and we acted from them as real. And what I decided when I read this list of 29 next stories and new stories, I said, wouldn't it be fun to talk with people about it? Just to chew on one each week for an hour. Because something I realized is that the old stories do dominate our behavior. And if we're thinking differently, if we say, no, that's not my experience, or wow, human beings could be more than that. My one voice is in my brain, but there's a lot of historic old stories that are dominant. But what I find when I listen to my friends in this discussion is that their voices and their ideas about the news stories join with my voice, and they became the dominant in my mind. So I'm becoming more conscious of the old stories that have run my life and more conscious of the stories that I want to live. Now, the one that we discussed this week is the old story was the driving force of human behavior, especially economic behavior, is to maximize rational self-interest. So some of what we discussed today is we think self-interest still is in the market, but this business that it should only be logical is questionable, which is the rational. And that a lot of what has developed from the economic side is the self-interest of those people who are running the companies and running the businesses, the larger corporations, and not so much the self-interest of the individual who are being convinced to buy the product or do the action. Now, the new story or the next story that Charles Einstein talked about this is it. Human beings yearn to express their gifts towards something meaningful. Do you buy that? I do. I mean, those are the questions my whole life. Like, why am I here? What am I here for? And the next part of his new story is we each have a unique and necessary gift for the world. And I really believe that's true. If you buy the old idea that we're just a cog in a wheel, that we're not valuable unless we have money and power, we miss the tremendous amounts of gifts that us everyday people have and that we contribute to society where we are. I would say it was probably hard for me to believe that I was unique in that way, or essential. Essential was probably the word, that the world needed the gift that I wanted to bring. And sometimes we bring our gifts to those around us, and sometimes we bring them to larger groups of people. But nonetheless, it's like having a missing ingredient. And for years, I've been really wanting to create a society where everybody's unique and essential gifts are honored and respected, are supported, so that we have children who have been listened to about their gifts and observed and supported all their lives. So they will be able to better gift those, whether that gift is in being a good listener, showing people love and affection, really thinking things through, problem solvers, or physical things like, being good in sports or dance or art. Nonetheless, what that means for the parents and the grandparents is that we start paying attention to them in a different way than we were paid attention to as children. When I was a kid, it was like, the old axiom about children should be seen and not heard was pretty dominant. you know, I went to a school with 50 kids in the classroom, and when I was in grade school. So that's a whole different operation than when you have 20 to 30 kids in a classroom. There still is a level of societal behavior that we will teach children just because they have to learn. Within a society, we have certain kind of parameters to acceptable behavior so that we all can thrive. And there's different ways that you and I, as parents and aunts, as uncles and grandparents, can work with kids to support them in being who they came here to be, to being that essential self for that, offering their gifts to the world. But that also means that you and I have that right as well. So I've worked with people on an individual basis. I had a healing practice for about 20 years, and everybody wanted some confirmation about what their purpose was. And I would often say, you're probably already living it. You just haven't. It may come in different forms. And so when we think back through our lives, what was the thing that made us feel good? What was the gift that we brought to the groups we were in, to our family, to the field that we ended up working in? And you may be, the grease that moved the wheel, but not obvious, but you're still there doing that. And in any case, it is a worthwhile occupation of your time, or at least certainly has been of my time, to think about how much of the old story really served me. Maybe it serves certain elements of society, but I don't believe that the old story of rational self-interest, particularly around in economics, has done the human race a whole lot of good. I think we have advances that have been good, but on the whole, we're not looking at creating an environment and a society where everyone thrives. We still have a stratified look at how life should be. We still treat people, and people of any color of skin other than white, as somehow not being a full human being. I just read a book, West into the Night, and it's written about Africa in the 1930s. And when reading it, I was struck by what it was like to be on a virgin continent that had yet not been civilized according to white culture, and how this affected this woman's thinking pattern and how she writes. If you're listening to this, you're probably part of the Western culture, and all of the stories that were dominant about how you should be or shouldn't be and how society is have framed a lot of how we behave in the world. And my question to you is, how would it be different for you if you lived your life? Like, what are my gifts and how do I give them? How do I use them to make my life meaningful? And it's in my corner of the world. I don't have to be meaningful on the large stage. It's just, how do I satisfy that for myself? And just ask yourself those questions. This process has allowed me to notice the old stories that used to run my life, or maybe still do now, and these new ways that I prefer to think about and treasure, because they're going to help me move more into who I came here to be. And I wish that for you as well. So if you're interested in continuing with these stories, we have one more you can register for by going to the website, www.loc-institute.com. Go to our events page, and you'll see to register for the February conversations. And there's just one left on February 23rd. And then register for the March sessions. And there's 5 of those. And we're just walking through and having these discussions of Charles Einstein's old and next stories. If you like to talk about stuff and toss thoughts into the air and be with others in the field who are thinking and tossing around ideas too, then join me. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.